Hi, and welcome to a special presentation on behalf of Hicks for Congress. I'm here with the CEO of Hicks, also CEO of Intercoin, Greg Magarshak. Greg, thank you for talking to us today.
Yeah.
So part of this campaign, we really care about a lot of the stuff that you care about. Democracy, poverty reduction, and cryptocurrency. With Bitcoin, there's a lot of energy out there, people interested in economic alternatives. And Gregory Litzenberg from the campaign is also here with us. And we've been here before, we've talked to you before. And so we wanted to kind of do something on video and give you a chance to talk about all the things that you do with your apps and your app technology services, and also Intercoin. And so let's jump right in. Let's start with Intercoin. Tell us about Intercoin and what are the social implications?
Sure. So I think the idea for Intercoin started when I had an interest in basic income, sort of idea that the community could decide how to manage their own money supply. And so it was an interesting idea, and a lot of VCs actually are interested in this, even though they're venture capitalists.
Yeah, that's funny. Like the guy from Union Square Ventures wrote a whole book about basic income. We should stop and explain to people what basic income is, guaranteed income.
Yeah, so basically, basic income is, imagine right now around the world, most countries have some sort of welfare or safety net for people. For example, if you fall on hard times, you'll get some sort of welfare check and you'll be able to survive and hopefully find a job. In many countries in Europe, they have universal health insurance. So anybody, regardless of how much they make, will have access to something. That second thing is much closer to universal basic income. Basically, it doesn't test whether you're poor before giving you money. There's many benefits to that, and this actually has support both on the left and on the right of the political spectrum. So on the right, people like Milton Friedman have said that, if you're not being tested to be poor first before getting benefits, you don't have a disincentive to have a job. You won't be turning down jobs because it could happen that you lose the job, then it takes another 6 months to get back on the welfare. And in the meantime, you're stuck. So a lot of people, they turn down jobs they would normally love to do because it's actually a rational thing with the current welfare, means-tested welfare system. So from that point of view, basic income can help people get more dignity, be able to work and not turn down jobs and support their family.
So how does basic income relate to Intercoin?
Yeah, so, I was just going to say on the left, it also enjoys a lot of support. So Martin Luther King, Martin Luther King Jr. Day just recently, he straight out called for basic income as a way to basically reduce inequality and a way to have equality of opportunity, because obviously, one example I just wanted to give, in Alaska, they have a form of basic income. They have sort of nationalized, I don't say nationalized, but the
oil. There's so much natural resources in the oil.
Yeah, so they have this fund called the Sovereign Fund, I think, I forgot what it's called. But basically, it pays out a dividend every year. And Alaska is the least unequal state in the nation, or the second least, for years and years and years. So how is that? I think it's because of this fund. Even though there's high unemployment, and it's a lot of rural areas, even so, this helps to set a floor. And we've seen, there's studies that people don't just waste their money if they're getting this money, they're spending on necessities first. So that's basic income in a nutshell. I just want to say it leads to greater equality. It also helps people get jobs, funny enough. So that's the idea versus, let's say, welfare systems today.
Mm-hmm. And now Intercoin is it's an economic tool. It has to do with, it's almost like, it's a pretty big, broad, revolutionary thing that you're proposing, right?
Yeah. So Intercoin basically started this because I run a company called Hicks, so we could talk about that. Basically, the company was started to decentralize social networks. We felt that if you want to interact with people, you shouldn't have your signals go to somewhere in California and then back, just so you could talk to people. There should be open source software that anyone can run in their own community, and people could just date, meet up for business, meet up for whatever, drive each other, without having one centralized service that controls everything, you know? There's always this talk about Facebook and Google and worries that maybe they're even controlling our democracy, right, in some way, or influencing. So it would be nice to have this open source software. We saw there's a need because there's not really open source software that's popular. Like WordPress for blogs, there was nothing for this. So we built that. And then when we looked at the cryptocurrency world, I looked at it and so my co-founder, Jason, he was always in the cryptocurrency world, and he was trying to pull me in, and I knew about Bitcoin, I knew about all this, but when I looked at all these projects, this was a year and a half ago, I realized they're similar to Facebook. They're decentralized in the sense of governance. No one governs them. But they are still one monolithic network. Like Bitcoin is one network. And so if I pay for coffee here and someone pays for coffee in Paris, it all goes into one giant blockchain on the same block. And so there's only so many things you could put in one block. And so it can only handle 7 transactions a second right now, today. That may change, but that's what it is now. And the transaction costs about $25 now at the current price of Bitcoin. So it costs me to do 3 confirmations, to pay for coffee, 30 minutes, and $30, basically $25, $30, to pay for coffee. And coffee is like $3. So it doesn't make any sense. No one's actually using Bitcoin right now to pay for anything. So we want
the transaction costs.
Exactly, transaction costs. And some businesses like Stripe, just last month, just a few weeks ago, they took off Bitcoin. They said, we're not accepting Bitcoin anymore. We're not processing Bitcoin transactions because it's become a store of value. It's become a security. It's become a security. But the initial idea was peer-to-peer cash system to pay with cash. So it hasn't lived up to that. And again, like with this, there has to be something out there that is being used. Otherwise, what's the point? Right. There's still a lot to disrupt. So Intercoin was this idea. It was like, why not make a network that works more like the internet, which is not one network. It's a network that connects lots of other networks. And each person, each organization can run their own network with their own rules, their own whatever.
Their own currency.
And their own currency.
But it's based on Intercoin. It's like Intercoin, it would be the reserve currency for local currencies. So break it down for us. I think one of your best examples is when you talk about specific cities that are experimenting with local currency, like Detroit or Ithaca.
Yeah, so some cities have already had their local currencies. Like Ithaca has Ithaca hours. Sort of an interesting alternative currency where each hour is worth the same, whether you're a farmer or whether you're a hairdresser or whether you're a web developer. I mean, it obviously presents some inefficiencies there because if you're a novice web developer, your hour is the same as a very seasoned web developer. But that aside, it says we're all human beings. This is the Ithaca hour, right? There's also Berkshires. This is like, in the Berkshires, they made this currency. And it
called Berkshires.
Called Berkshires.
Right. Clever.
And it's not shares of Berkshire Hathaway. It's which, because it sounds like that. But it's basically, again, it looks like, the only thing is it can't look like the federal currency. And then the Congress leaves you alone. There's a thing about the Liberty dollars. A lot of libertarians say, the guy went to jail, I think, for printing what he called the Liberty dollar.
I remember that they were raided. Yeah, the Ron Paul people were freaking out because there was a raid in Texas.
So they called it the dollar. It looked like a dollar, I think. And that was the problem.
Yeah.
There are currencies in like I said, there's the Bristol pound, which is called a pound, but it's like, there maybe they have different rules. But it's a Bristol pound, and the town of Bristol has its own currency. So these currencies currently exist, but they are centralized in the sense that you have to trust the central bank of Bristol credit union, or you have to trust something that's centralized. All those numbers are in one database somewhere. And if someone gets in that database, it's like in Fight Club, it blows up the database. You don't know who has what anymore.
Yeah.
That's what blockchains have come about to change. They say it's not just on one computer. It's going to live here. It's going to live on your computer. It's going to live on whatever. And if I'm accepting your payment, I may want like a notary or a blockchain participant that I know, that I trust, to be in that game. I want him watching that you're not spending that somewhere else. It's called a double spend. So those are, the principle behind Intercoin was basically that all these networks are monolithic, which makes them expensive and slow once they scale to everybody. So instead, why not let every community run its own network? And therefore, when I pay for coffee in New York, it stays locally. It doesn't affect at all the Paris economy, which could have a Paris coin, and you could have a New York coin. So that's the idea of Intercoin.
And you have some good news that you have now raised $300K from investors. You're in a kind of seed round right now, pre-ICO.
Yeah, so...
It's going to be an ICO. So for those that don't know, an ICO is an initial coin offering in which the Intercoin token,
right.
Which you are planning to actually register with the SEC, which is also unique. Is that right?
We're planning to. I can't really talk too much about that because
Okay,
we don't want to make statements as to what will happen or won't happen with the
You're
SEC.
exploring the possibilities of having a high degree of scrutiny and working with federal, possibly working with. We can't talk about it.
Well, let's put it this way.
My attorney, Daniel Stibiel, was very impressed with you because he has ties to the SEC, and was very impressed because we're also working on an ICO possibility in the future called Miracle Coin or Daycoin, and we're exploring the different names for it. Has to do with real estate and social impact, but that.
No, for example, your coin, what technology are you going to use to launch it?
Yeah, probably Intercoin.
Probably Intercoin. I mean, right now everyone uses Ethereum, ERC20 tokens, and they put it on this global computer.
Right.
Ethereum's been talking, the development guys have been talking about partitioning this network for years and years, but they haven't done it yet. So it's all kind of this, again, slow,
So tell me
expensive.
why, if I was about to do a local ICO it has local impact, social impact, social benefits, why would I want to go with Intercoin and not Ethereum?
So first of all, Intercoin is just, it's dead simple. You download it like WordPress, you install it on a bunch of computers, and you start it off. You basically set the rules of your community, what you want, how many coins you want, and you have your internal currency. Now, you can't cash in and out of it yet, and that makes it worthless outside of the community. So then comes Intercoin, and Intercoin is a way to connect all these communities. So once you're in the community, let's say you're a business, so you want to pay your employees, right? Right. What happens now is when you accept Visa, there's a lot of payment systems. Visa, there's PayPal, there's WeChat in China is very popular. What happens is you get Venmo or PayPal and you cash out. You get the money and right away you cash out in your bank account. But that costs you a 3% fee or whatever. So now you're incentivized to tell your employees, I'll pay you in Venmo, I'll pay you in PayPal, or in this case, I'll pay you in my local currency. They say, why do we need it? We spend outside of the community. I want to buy an iPad, a MacBook. Well, Apple doesn't accept this yet, right? But as more and more communities install this, suddenly your employees will say, okay, I'll take some money in this because you'll have 3% more because there's almost no fees. And they'll instantly be able to make global remittances to their family members in another country. They can make global purchases with a vendor in another country. And the whole thing happens instantly. So it's sort of like a new global payment network of networks. Mm-hmm. And it's internet. It's the Intercoin. So that's sort of the...
That's why it's called Intercoin.
That's why it's called Intercoin.
How does it impact poverty reduction in communities?
Oh, so there's a lot of ways. So we feel that right now a lot of communities don't have control of their own currency. And you can see this all over the map. You could see this in Greece, for example. Greece and Cyprus, when they joined the euro, they used to have their own drachma, right? And then they joined the euro and they lost control of their monetary policy. So they weren't able to print money anymore. They have to get European banks to lend them money. So there's talk of austerity. There's going to be variation. Some places are going to do better and some places are going to do worse. The question is, if some places are doing worse, what should you do? Should you impose austerity on those places, which can lead to less money being spent locally and less, and there's a downward spiral? Or would you let them have their own currency, right? And just like a company could bring on new investors, right, by issuing shares, they have the power to do that. They have some leverage, some levers they could pull. It would be nice for local communities to do that. So take Detroit, for example. The story of Detroit, as I see it, and everyone has their narrative. My narrative is automation happened. A lot of things. So, you look, Detroit was a great hub of automobile, the Motor City, right? They were creating all these automobiles. Money's pouring in. Automobiles are being sold. And that's still happening today. right? However, what's changed is that the machines are mostly running the factories. Whereas before, you'd have a lot of people running it, now you need like 100 times less people, let's say. I don't know what the factor is. So that means less people are taking home a paycheck, and more shareholders around the country are taking home their dividend, or whatever it is. However that money goes, it doesn't go in the pocket of the local population. So they don't go to the store as much. They don't buy as much locally. And then the store doesn't have as many employees. You see where this is going? So it's a spiral where the money dries up. One way you can describe the situation is Detroit is going bankrupt. Another way to describe it is Detroit is running a deficit of dollars. Less dollars are coming in than are coming out. People need to import food unless there's locally, sustainable sourced food. They need to import all kinds of things. Our Harley Davidson, I don't know where that's made. If it's made in Detroit, they don't need to import that. But let's say a Ducati, right, from Italy needs to be imported, as an example. So Intercoin doesn't solve necessarily the deficit completely. It just gives the community the ability to make decisions. One decision the community can make is basic income. It can say, now there's going to be a floor.
Right.
And what...
It'll be paid in our local currency, so it'll be like Detroit dollars or Detroit tokens.
Exactly. A libertarian-minded person would come in and say, especially sort of right libertarian, right, would say, well, you're stealing the money from the people, right? I didn't mean to make that accent. Okay, but the point is...
What accent was that?
Well, you're stealing, It's always... but yeah, basically...
You're alluding to the idea that
taxation is theft. And that's because they believe, look, you're initiating force, right? You're taking my property.
Coercion.
Here's the thing, though. This is all voluntary, right? In the sense that the vendor chooses to accept Visa, for example. It's not fiat currency. The Visa payment network got everybody to accept it. It took a few decades, but they got it, everybody, and it was Visa everywhere you want to be. Remember that?
Yeah.
So now Visa's there. Venmo, PayPal, right? A lot of people accept that. WeChat has become, it's voluntary. Okay. The second point is this currency is being inflated. You choose to accept it, knowing that it could be inflated by democratic vote, by people deciding democratically, by democratic process, maybe direct democracy, of what level of basic income there should be. So even a libertarian who is very fiscally conservative would say, look, it's completely voluntary. We just want more people to accept a socially responsible currency and not just a currency like gold or federal dollars or federal euros, because they're out of touch with the local needs of the local people. So, Berkshire, nobody's forcing these businesses to accept it. Berkshire's. They're accepting it. So even, I'm telling you that basic income in this, done this way, by inflating the currency itself, according to democratic principles, is both, democratic at the same time, it can help people, and it's sound money, because all that money is backed by Intercoin. So you, as a community...
Now, wait a minute, though. People, if somebody was a skeptic, they would say, backed by Intercoin, Intercoin's a pre-ICO, token based on, you know how people talk about Bitcoin, it's not backed by anything.
Exactly. I think that's a great point, and we're talking about a world 5 years from now, when, you're talking about Intercoin is back. It's sort of interesting that Intercoin is backing the economies, right?
Right.
Local economies. But at the same time, Intercoin derives its value from the economy. It's, like the asset and the liability. Mm-hmm. So the Intercoin is, you could think of it as the asset, and the local economy has the liabilities circulating. And then somebody can redeem that for the Intercoin and go spend it in another economy. Many of these currencies, including Bitcoin, have no floor. I mean, theoretically, they're not tokenizing anything of value. They're sort of, it's a market where today, what I mean by that is in the following sense. Today I use Bitcoin, tomorrow I can use Litecoin, right? Or Monero or something else. So it's like I can use Bing or I can use Google or I could use, Yahoo or something to search, right? There's very little barrier for me to just switch from one to the other. And if like the new MySpace, the new Facebook comes out, Bitcoin could go down, and there's no really floor where, as for example, if you're tokenizing something of value, let's say hard drive space, like Filecoin, that's an actual thing. So there's a floor, that hard drive space is useful to some people. People argue gold is useful. Yeah, it has some uses, and so there's a floor, I guess, With Bitcoin, there's no floor. Now, with Intercoin, the idea is that Intercoin has a symbiotic relationship with these communities. The more communities adopt local currency, the more Intercoin has to be on reserve to back that. And so Intercoin represents, the floor of it is actually local commerce. Do people value local commerce? If they do, Intercoin has a value.
Great. Now, can you give us a specific example of a local community in which you're going to try to roll out Intercoin?
Yeah, let me pick one. Let's say, because I haven't talked about micropayments yet. So let me talk about Harvard University, like any university, NYU. It's got so many alumni. They call them up. I know I'm one of them. They call, they say, hey, could you donate? Could you, how much can you donate? Can you come to our events, right? So as Cubics, we build apps to connect the alumni. That's one thing. And as Intercoin, the alumni can now donate to something and see how that money is being spent. Not individually, not how each person individually spends, but in aggregate. One of the benefits of Intercoin technology is that you can see, people are actually spending a lot on food, and they're choosing to spend a lot on this. You have insight in this. It's interesting, in the United States, there's only 5 regions where they do the consumer price index. I think there's 5 regions in the whole country. So consumer price index, even though there's variations, if you go over to New Jersey from New York, things might be cheaper or more expensive depending on, right? Those conditions are not captured because we're part of one region. What Intercoin does is it says within your community, we know how much is being spent on food. And that's another crucial thing for basic income, because how do you know how much to give out to people if you don't know how much they're spending on food? If you want to subsidize food, you need to know how much they're spending. So Intercoin has both the insight of how much aggregate's being spent and the democratic governance mechanism, which is a crucial aspect of it, if you want basic income. It's a crucial aspect of that.
So the democratic aspect of Intercoin really enables the community to initiate any policies that they see fit and really expand the platform of Intercoin to include services or roles that the community would take on. My question, I guess, is could a community initiate like a job guarantee through Intercoin where they set the acceptable unemployment rate and they set their unemployment rate at 0 and anyone who wants a job can get one?
Well, first of all, I'm going to say I haven't thought about all the implications, and that's another cool thing is that Intercoin will allow third-party developers to come up with all sorts of interesting solutions, right? It's an experiment, but as it grows and is proven out, many people will run their own experiments on top of it. Now about jobs, obviously it can't be 0% precisely because there's going to be people in the hospital who are in a coma, and they can't have that job regardless of your policies.
Right. One of the like catch-22, so to speak, about unemployment is you have to be looking for a job.
Yeah, obviously. Unless your job involves being filmed while you're in the coma, So you can't have 100% job security, but I'll actually twist it a little bit the other way. We have a lot of innovation now in computers and automation. And that's been happening, like I've been telling, with Detroit, right? And that phenomenon is going to possibly accelerate. The computers might be running self-driving cars. There's 70 million drivers in the United States, okay? Not all of them are commercial, but for example. People in McDonald's kiosks, and now you can order your own food. And Obama was talking about this, I think, 2012, and he said, bank tellers, passport kiosks at the airport, it's been noticed that people's jobs are being taken by machines. Now, maybe there will be more jobs. Maybe there will be other jobs. There's certainly shortages My friends have pointed out there's shortages in rural America for a lot of jobs, for example. And how that plays out is up to the market, I feel. But if there is a basic income, a floor, then you don't even need things like minimum wage laws. I'll explain. If everyone's already has not a living wage, but a living income, which they have irrespective of a job, right? We won't need as a society to make sure the employer pays them a certain amount, which will allow unpaid internships. In New York City, unpaid internships are technically illegal, I think, many of the internships. But people are kind of like, because technically they're not supposed to be able to help you with anything in your company, and then they can work for you. It's educational. Just as an example, so how many teenagers could learn on the job? But theoretically, an employer might, be apprehensive if they're really they want to be on and up and up, right? They read the law, they're like, I can't hire you because I need you to help me, but then I'll need to pay you this much, and you're not worth this much. To me, I'm going to lose money on you. So basic income also allows, with the reduction or elimination of the minimum wage laws, right? Because you don't need them. Again, it's not, if minimum wage laws are about people doing well, then just raise the basic income, right? But then people will have a choice to be able to work for free, even
There'd be so much more volunteering. If there's a basic income, a guaranteed income, then people would be freed up to volunteer more. We'd have a whole different society. There wouldn't be that pressure to make the rent, and I guess the guaranteed income would have to be higher in New York because the rent is higher in New York.
So it will be phased in. Look, I'm not saying we can afford a total switch over to a basic income tomorrow.
In New York especially.
In New York especially. Cities like San Francisco, New York, right, Moscow, very expensive cities. And that's another reason why it needs to be a local basic income, local economy, because the doctor in Beverly Hills is not being paid the same as the doctor in, I don't even know how universal health insurance, I'm not an expert, and I don't know how they decide. But obviously the doctor is going to be paid more who lives in Beverly Hills than the doctor who lives in Wichita, Kansas, because the cost of living is just less. So I don't know what the formula or the actuarial tables are for all this, but with this, there are no formulas or tables. The community measures how much people are actually spending and then votes on how much they should subsidize that for there.
And tell us, what's your background? Are you from Moscow or Moscow?
Yeah, I mentioned. So my family immigrated. They're Russian Jews, actually, and they immigrated from the Soviet Union at the time. It was Leningrad. Now it's St. Petersburg.
Yes.
So I grew up, I was 1 year old. So I call New York home, I guess, since I was one. Yeah.
Great. What company did you run before Cubics?
Before Cubics, I mostly worked as a social media senior developer. I worked all over the city, helping people with their Facebook campaigns, brands, a lot of like Neutrogena, a lot of different brands, and I saw that's what made me realize that I want to build software that helps people in the real world, because I looked at a lot of these campaigns, and they were people, I should say, it's an open secret, a lot of them were buying likes, and
oh yeah,
and it's not just buying likes, it's that what do you really get from a like, and what do you really get from people spending 3 hours a day on a website? I wanted to see a social network where people go and socialize and pay locally to their local merchants, like a restaurant or a bowling alley, and have that happen. So even back then I was, and dating and everything is basically, if you look at photos of people in the 50s and 40s, they're out. The difference is the street is full of people. And if you look at photos now, everyone's sort of in their house, and they are getting Amazon delivered to their house, and they're ordering in. So it's a very different world, and in a way we're losing a lot of the interactions that we used to have. I wonder if that's maybe related to the depression incidence rate and loneliness and things that people feel, even in large cities, which is kind of crazy. You live in a large city, how many of us know our neighbors or downstairs neighbors? I feel like this can be a tool for good, or it could also be a tool for more loneliness and more sort of efficiency, but at the same time, we need, as humans, to have our humanity and to share it with each other. That's how I feel.
So in 10 years, where's Intercoin going to be? And ideally, 10 years. To give us the picture of what are the maximum social impacts, that it could have.
God willing, if it's good, it can, for example, help the favelas in Brazil. It can help a lot of villages in Africa to rise from poverty in a very organic way. For example, if we go to the lowest per capita income communities around the world first, and we give them Intercoin, they can just start using it, and then Intercoin, if it rises in price, right? Because you can't predict whether it's going to rise in price or not, but if it does, like Bitcoin, then the early adopters will see their purchase power increase. Like with Bitcoin, you were able to buy a pizza, and then you're able to buy a car, and now you're able to buy a house, right? With like 20 Bitcoins. The same way, if you are living in the favelas, and there's crime, and there's poor health outcomes, etc. So if we go there first, and they can implement this, you could get easy wins. You could have a lot of news stories later that say, crime in favelas is down. Health outcomes are up. They're buying iPads. How is it possible? Well, because they have Intercoin. And they're able to cash out for iPads now because they're first adopters. So we're putting together 5% of the ICO goes to that actually. 5% of Intercoin is earmarked for those lowest per capita communities.
And when is the ICO? Maybe.
The multi-million-dollar question. The ICO will happen, I'll just say there are three things that sort of need to happen before. One is the pre-ICO with VCs, and we're doing a pre-ICO with, that you could probably, if you're watching this, you could find it. The other is, like you said, with the SEC, we want to explore whether we can register the coin, which would help because if the SEC approves it and registers Intercoin, anyone can freely trade it, whether you're an accredited investor, unaccredited investor. If it's on an exchange that's approved, like the T0, there you go. You can buy it without any worry about the federal government, later saying this exchange, it's all regulated. The third is that we need to actually launch the technology and make sure it's secure. That's where the money is going from the pre-ICO. Right. That and basically legal research and tax research. So to answer your question, probably this summer, there's going to be an ICO of Intercoin.
Summer of 2018.
Summer of 2018.
You heard it here first.
Yeah.
Great. Is there anything we didn't cover thus far, Greg? Greg L? Glitzy Greg?
One thing that I find very fascinating about Intercoin is the democratic model is not based on universal voting. Can you tell us a little bit about the voting model?
Yeah, so, and Lawrence Lessig I don't know if anyone remembers, he was running he was going to announce his candidacy for president in this 2016 election. And he said that he was running because the democratic process is broken, and he wants to highlight that. He said he's probably not going to win, but he wants to highlight that. I think it's true that it was, and it is broken still. And there are a couple things that we can do as Americans to fix that without waiting for Intercoin and without waiting for the federal government. One thing is that we need to look at our ballots, okay? Our ballot is a system called first past the post, which means the person who gets the most votes after a certain point, you pass that point, you win, that's it. The problem is, first of all, that leads to things like can't vote for third-party candidates because a vote for this is a vote against this, or, it's like that calculus. And so, for example, Bernie Sanders runs a Democratic primary. He loses. Then he doesn't run because he knows that if he runs, he's going to take away votes from people who would have otherwise voted for Hillary, let's say, right? And he wants her to win. Michael Bloomberg said this explicitly. I'm not getting into the race because I don't want certain people to win, he said. This calculus is kind of crazy in a democracy. Why should you not run and people not vote for you even though they agree with your policies? Because they're afraid to hurt someone else running. So all you have to do is change the ballot, which is something you can do in your local electorate district, in your community. Now, some states have rules, and Maine was the first state to vote and actually allow another system that's called ranked voting. You say, this person's first, this person's second, this person's third. Ranked voting allows candidates to run. If they have enough support, they can't hurt each other as much.
So instead of just checking one box for who you want to win, you put a number next to each candidate who you want first, second, third.
Right, and an even easier system, and I didn't know this, somebody had told me this, and it's true, it has the best statistical properties as far as I know, and I have a math background, so this is sort of a serious statement, I guess, is that it's a system called the approval vote. And that can be simply explained. That's one of its best things. Instead of putting one check mark, you could put as many as you want. Hey, should we go to New Jersey, Florida?
Like dialing in marketing surveys, the dials.
Yeah, choose all the ones you like, and just don't choose the ones you don't like. So they don't hurt each other.
Right.
I would love to see this implemented.
Yeah.
Now another thing. Voting still has problems. Even that has problems. The problem is voter turnout, for example. Gerrymandering, okay? There's a lot of these things. Let's say you hold, I'm Jewish, okay? And I'm observant to some degree. If you hold the vote on a Saturday, I won't go, right? I won't vote, no matter how great the candidate is, because let's say that it involves, maybe some Jews wouldn't do that. If you hold it on a Sunday, maybe a devout Quaker or somebody who really doesn't want to violate their Sabbath day. So voting has those problems, okay? Look at Puerto Rico. They voted to join the United States. And the majority has voted, and several times.
Right.
But the turnout was 20% or something. So what does that mean? That means 13% of, let's say, Puerto Rico votes to join. But they're the people that bothered to show up. Should their effort, therefore, count more than the people who didn't bother to show up? Some would say yes, some would say no, right? What if you replace that with polling? Polling is statistical sampling, and you can use statistical techniques as long as your sample is representative. You have an estimator of what people actually think. You can poll about policies, you can poll about gun control, you could poll about healthcare. They have done these polls. Majority of people, let's say, supports universal healthcare or Medicare for all. I don't know whether this, I don't like to state things, I don't know, but let's say that is true. Let's say they do support. That is a significant fact. Why doesn't it happen? Because we have a representative democracy where even though the population may support it, we still need to vote, right? And then the representatives and the majority of those need to get. That sometimes leads to problems. And I'll bring up one of those, and I think that should be sufficient. Venezuela. Venezuela is a great example of where representative democracy can break down, okay? What do I mean? You had the Chavistas, and then you had the Maduro government, right? The Maduro government gets elected. Venezuela economy is backed by oil. Oil prices drop, so Venezuela needs to pay back the bankers, right? Just like with Greece, they need to pay back the bankers. Or Iceland. Now, Iceland told the bankers to go stuff it, and they did a reset. Venezuela kept paying the bankers for years, and they kept saying, we're good for it. While their own people, what happened, let's say they print more money. That's one way to pay the bankers. But that dilutes the confidence in the money, and it dilutes the people's ability to pay. You're taking away the money from the people and giving it to foreign banks. If Venezuela had a direct democracy instead, the people could continuously say, for every one bolivar that you give to the banks, you print 4 and you give them as basic income to the people. So now they are being diluted by not as much.
The factor goes down.
The factor hugely goes down. They can import, they won't starve from, it's nice if they have locally sourced food, and I think they should have that. But you need imports. And if you elect representatives that can screw you at any time, literally, that's not so great. It would be nice if there was more direct democracy, I feel. And polling is now, finally, technology allows us to do that. And I think it just wasn't feasible about 50 years from now to do polling. So, yeah, if you had to say what I would like to see, I would like to see direct democracy via polling in more and more matters, right? More and more policies. I'd like to see more local democracy, cities, townships. Not about everything. Like I said, starting out, I think there should be federal laws about body cameras, right? It shouldn't matter where you are, and civil liberties should not differ from place to place. But when you're talking about the economy, when you're talking about those things, it would be nice to know that you have a shortage of tomatoes and not wait for FEMA, to come and rescue you with a lot of tomatoes. So that I would like to see stronger local economies, and I think this is a message that is enjoys support both on the left and on the right, because people know that they'd rather hang out with the neighbors and help them out than wait for someone to collect money from the whole nation and then transfer it to them and wait for the after
That's
hurricane.
bureaucracy, man.
Yeah, exactly. So we can all agree that technology helps remove a lot of the bureaucracy that used to be.
So I'll tell you a story. I was on the road in Silicon Valley back in 2014, and I went to a Bitcoin conference, and Bitcoin was just sort of getting going in 2014. And but I saw Charlie Shrem speak, and I could see the social impact. I could see the potential. And now Bitcoin has gone into a frenzy this year. The valuation has spiked, and so it's great to meet somebody who's got a social conscience, spirituality,
Thank you.
good politics, and 300K in the bank of investors that are really backing your venture. So I think Intercoin is blessed to have a great future for social impacts to really help people.
Thank you. I really hope so.
Yes, mazel tov.